I'm going to do things a little differently for this episode. I went back in the Marketing Rapport vault and picked out parts of conversations that had an impact on me. Since this podcast is about being data-driven, there was a clear, consistent theme throughout: being data-driven and how to use data and the challenges it presents.
Welcome to the Marketing Rapport, a podcast created for and by marketing professionals who seek to better understand their consumers and design unique, personalized experiences that stand out in today's market. In each episode, hosts from Verisk Marketing Solutions connect you to industry thought leaders, practitioners, and experts focused on improving B2C experiences through powerful data-driven insights. It's about how we connect with our consumers and where we can partner together to do it better. This is the Marketing Rapport.
Welcome to the Marketing Rapport. I'm Tim Finnigan, and I head up product marketing at Verisk Marketing Solutions, which is a business unit of Verisk, and we specialize in consumer data and insights. In each episode of the podcast, I typically have a conversation with a subject matter expert in their industry, and we talk about their experiences and how they make an impact delivering data-driven results. I'm going to do things a little differently for this episode. I went back in the Marketing Rapport vault and picked out parts of conversations that had an impact on me. Since this podcast is about being data-driven, there was a clear, consistent theme throughout: being data-driven and how to use data and the challenges it presents. How many times have we heard on this podcast alone that the struggle is real? You just can't keep up with the rate of change when it comes to consumer data. And this is no slight to any marketer or business, but the fact is data is hard. Doing data right requires help. Good data is the foundation for all strategic marketing when it comes to driving profitable growth. Data can unlock it. Verisk Marketing Solutions is innovating consumer insights. But how? Well, at the end of the day, it's simply data, and consumer insights are derived from that data. Good data equals good insights. Bad consumer data can have immeasurable impact on customer experience, employee morale, brand perception, and of course, profitability. So let's get to the stars of the show. In our first clip, Nola Solomon, the SVP of go-to-market at Criezis, which is a global commerce media company, joined me and shared her thoughts on data, specifically first-party data, and how it can drive consumer insights to improve the consumer experience. Let's hear what Nola had to say. Nola, when you talk about loyalty and making sure you're there and you've got an answer, is that sort of maybe when you think of first-party data and how it's so important and the future of it? Could you just sort of touch base on how what Criezis sees first-party data, or you personally, and the importance of it?
Yeah, absolutely. First party data is very important. I was trying to find a better word than very, but it didn't come to me fast enough. I like to be a little more prosaic. It's really about driving consumer experience, right? So first party data allows you to better understand the brand, right? Whether you are a publisher, whether you're a retailer, whether you're an advertiser, to understand who your consumers are and what they're about, what they like to do, what they like to shop for, what they're doing across the internet, what they're doing in store or in physical environments, as much as, that data is available. It's really incredible to have all of those touch points come together to create insights that you can then use to improve that consumer experience across your sites or your stores or your other channels for much more powerful advertising marketing purposes that also drive better value for those consumers themselves. That's like fundamentally, I think, a really critical component of why first party data is so just generically important for our industry. But I would say it's become even more so because of changes in the industry when it comes to addressability and our ability to actually do one-to-one advertising, which impacts user experience. It impacts measurement and our ability to attribute the value of those advertising dollars. It impacts personalization and dynamic creative optimization, targeting, the ability to dynamically optimize as things are performing or not throughout the chain of running a campaign or monetizing an inventory or data set. And fundamentally, with cookies going away on Safari and Firefox and Edge, with the beginning of the deprecation on 1% of cookies on Chrome that's starting in January, On the browser-based environments, it becomes extremely critical for all of these brands that have direct touch points with consumers to really lean into that first-party data collection to keep that ability to understand their consumer in a more fleshed out way, and their ability to then find and reach them in the appropriate ways with the appropriate messages that is under threat right now in the industry. So first party data is a huge, huge part of that solve.
Obviously, Nola knows what she's talking about, and now Google has actually started phase testing of a cookieless future. Nola's advice on building that data set in-house, really enriching your first-party data with as much insight, attributes, and behavior as you can, will ultimately help your business. She make the great point about good data can power great insights, but that data evolves so quickly that accurate data is next to impossible to maintain on your own. Next, we had Thom Gruhler, founder and CEO of Fury, a marketing strategy agency. He was also former marketing executive at Microsoft and the president at McCann Erickson ad agency. And he spoke into great detail about data modeling and augmentation. And then I was able to chat with Andrew Criezis, who's currently the president of e-commerce of Omni at Nielsen IQ. And Andrew speaks about the changing landscape of data and how the world of influencers and evolving tech are both driving and affected by those changes now and into the future. So when you say chat GBT and innovation, what are some other, it could be that, what are some cool innovations that you're seeing in the marketplace as far as up and coming technology or technology sales or marketing teams can use to, what you said, to accelerate growth?
Yeah, I think when it comes to the use of data to accelerate growth, I think the overwhelming majority of smart work is in the space of organizing the data, modeling the data, let's say, and augmenting the data to drive some of these predictive outcomes. And there's a bunch of innovation going on how to organize the data, how to low code, no code, drag and drop, let's call it governance can be added to how your data goes into a data lake or into a data environment. There's a lot of innovation going on how to model that data. What are the parameters that you need in the data? Whether that's bringing in third-party data, whether it's adding regulation or restriction on data that you can use, masking PII. There's some really interesting innovation there. And then the third is, how do you apply tools that allow a user, self-deployed user, to do AI innovation, meaning, hey, let me run a program for my customer to look at the next best product I should sell them. And let me do that instead of some analyst down in the IT organization. And so if you look at any one of those three areas, there's just lots and lots going on in that space. That's all AI. It's not generative AI like ChatGPT, but it's all AI driven, but it's applied to these data sets. And that's the most interesting part to me of being in B2B, which is where we live. In B2C, all the data is behavioral data, lives up here, scraped off the web. It's a fairly easy and well tracked, easy to model and well tracked data set. In B2B, it's all first party data that sits in the organization that needs to be augmented, needs to be cared for and treated with a governance and respect from a compliance perspective. But it also needs to be treated with care as to what are the outcomes we're trying to generate. And that's a really rich space that we play in a lot, and I think is important.
Yeah, great answer. And speaking of data, like how either you or what sort of best practices of applying data, say, to improve customer relationships or customer experiences? What are you seeing either from your past experiences or currently? Like, how do we take this marketing data that's pretty exciting and adding to the end user's customer experience?
Yeah, I mean, personalization and the use of AI to drive personalization based on what we know about a customer is an unbelievable opportunity. One we get excited about. That personalization could be what's the next best product to put in front of that customer? What's the next best campaign touch for that customer? Or it could be, hey, what's the next thing the call center should say to that person if they were to call us with a service request or what have you. But it's the ability to take a data set that we know of a customer, to augment it with multiple fields, connect those fields, and come up with an algorithm that suggests what these treatments should be for this customer is I think a very cool and emerging space. And I've seen lots of companies trying to build those decision sets and feed them into their sales organization or their service organization to improve what that customer experience is. It's all through personalization. It's just like what you asked me when I was at Microsoft. If that person knows what I'm doing, knows what I'm struggling with, and has ways to help me, I'm going to listen every time. And I think that's what companies are trying to do with the data they have at their fingertips.
Where does privacy come in there? Because it seems like that's the really big buzzword with, some of the TCPA and all the different things that are coming through. I know as a business, Verisk Marketing Solutions, we're constantly like, what's the balance between personalization and privacy? What's your point of view on that? Or what's Nielsen's trying to accomplish?
Yeah, no, so it's actually, I think it actually makes a company like Nielsen, more important in this space because we do have all the privacy considerations when it comes to panels. So when you think about personal data and panels, right, we have household panels in the US, 100,000 households that are, fully codified, no personal information is given out, but we're able to pull up unique attributes and extend it, extrapolate it against the population of the US and do it in a way that doesn't identify the individual, right? So we're following all the guidelines as well as from a European standpoint, which obviously, as you know, is significantly more strict. And I think what happens is when you don't have a curated panel, you don't come to a company like a Nielsen IQ that has online panels or household panels. There's a lot more, call it backdoor ways to get personal information. And at the core of us, that's not what we're about. We are very upfront with anyone that we're working with. They're part of the, panels on purpose, and they're open to kind of sharing data. And then it's fully anonymized, right? So all the data is going into more of an algorithm behind the scenes, and then it's being tabulated in code. So one, I think having guidelines, right? Having standards like there are in Europe and elsewhere, but also having companies that can centralize this and follow procedures and have a quality standard is important for then the rest of the industry to be able to take advantage of that. Because it's not just about, okay, is data out there on a personal level, but it's how is it being used and consumed, and where along like that supply chain of personal data is it being altered or changed, and then what's it being used for. Now, obviously, I think there's a level of personalization that happens sometimes with advertising that can be, pretty extreme, but there's also a certain amount of, I think, populace who, wants to opt in, right? Just wants to have, if you can give me products, CPG products, give me, ads or experiences that are more relevant to me. People are like, give me that. I'd rather have that than something random. So I think it's almost, you get this split. At the end of the day, the raw data, having that standardized, having that following procedures and companies that actually care about it and give a quality standard to it and report on it. That's the key. Otherwise it can be, misused.
So all this data and all the ways to leverage it, the implications of good data versus bad data, and innovation driven by quality data, these are all foundational to good marketing. But with that being said, there's the ever-present and clearly growing consumer privacy landscape. And responsible data use and managing consumer privacy issues is paramount to protecting your business from both a compliance standpoint, but also a customer experience standpoint. That ultimately translates into opportunity and profitability. Now, take a listen to Kelly Barrett, the SVP of Product Management at Comscore, and what she had to say about this.
And so I want to pivot a little to talking about what you're seeing as far as trends in the marketplace, what other industry leaders are paying attention to.
Yeah, certainly. I think privacy is one of the biggest ones. It's sort of all encompassing, whether we're talking to data leaders who are not even at the forefront of using data, but they have use cases, rely on that data that is either being collected or processed or anything along those lines, and making sure that consent is going all the way through the process. And then, if you're a global company, you're looking at things like the GDPR in Europe and making sure that even if you're an American company, you're still respecting the way that Europeans want their data to be collected and processed and everything along the lines. There's so much of that, and it changes by minute. Even here in the States, the count is up to 5 as of today, February 15th, 2023, is, looking at sensitive data information around, health and race and ethnicity and things like that in data and what can be collected. And if there is no given consent, that's a no. You just cannot have it. How does that trickle down? And then how does that actually also juxtapose against wanting to make sure that for measurement, we have the representation that we need so that we're not underreporting or underserving certain population. So there's this balance between, the regulatory side, how that shows up
Right.
in data and measurement, and making sure that it doesn't impact in a different negative way. So that's certainly one of the big trends. And then that mentioned before, data clean rooms, and how we can then, once we have data, how can we make sure that through clean methods that we are able to share insights, to share data. And when I say share, I just mean really connected. And a big thing is also like making sure that data is not moving around and being lost track of. I think that's going to be a big like rise of, great, now you've got these clean rooms in place, you're putting data into it. How do you make sure the data stays there and that applications and compute is being built in for those use cases that we mentioned before into the instances of, let's say, a client that you're working with or a partner that you're working with within that space. Right now, as I mentioned, it's a lot of bring your data, bring my data, do a match and create a Venn diagram.
Yeah.
Now we're going to have to get more and more sophisticated. And I think that's a big trend. And then the other thing is really just, as I mentioned, especially in the measurement space, it's about how do we capture everything that's going on? And when I say everything, I'm sure I will walk out this door and there'll be a new thing for us to measure. We talked about gaming and VR and things like that. And what's the next that will need to be measured where a consumer eyeball happens to hit?
You can see that data knowledge is becoming more critical. Now let's take a listen to Andrew Criezis, who reinforces that data knowledge truly is becoming more critical.
What's that skill set that you're looking for when you talk to someone that's looking to either move jobs or start a career?
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a few things. One, just given where the industry is going, a depth of understanding around data is invaluable. So understanding not just how you can use data, but the limitations. So for me, it was getting experience with a master's in data science to understand, not because I was going to be the coder and actually go develop lots of models left and right, but as I was, continuing my career, I knew as an executive, I wanted to have the ability to understand what can it not do. Whether I'm looking at businesses or I'm supporting brands, like what are those limitations? So having a depth of understanding, whether that's a little bit of coding background and maybe some databasing background, highly valuable. Now you can get that in a lot of different ways. It doesn't have to be from a standard data science or from a master's of science, but having experience with that, whether you're self-taught or you've gone to a formal program, either one is completely fine. And then I think the second thing is being able to have knowledge of or have a strategic and business mindset. So those are the two things I'm looking for. It's kind of the balance of the two. And it's oftentimes I talk about, there's a book, I'm blanking on it, but they call it the purple people, right? So it's like blue is, the extreme of like data. And then you've got like red, which is more the business side. And it's actually between the two where those are really critical resources. So if you're thinking about yourself from a career standpoint, you're starting out, maybe you've started on the business side or you did an econ major or a business major or a marketing major, but it's also how do you go deeper on the data side? You don't need to be the data scientist, but you've got to be able to translate, have a conversation with that side because the magic happens in the middle. It's important to know each aspect, but the magic happens in the middle. And then likewise, if you start on the data side, be willing to take some experiences, jump into a role, challenge yourself jumping into a marketing role. Maybe you started as a data person, but challenge yourself to go into marketing, even if that's not your long-term vision or mission. By having that experience in marketing and then going back into the data side, it's incredibly useful, and likewise the opposite. So for me, my advice to those starting out is one, jump in first off, pick an area but don't stay in that vertical, go wide and don't worry so much about that first job. It's important to have a good company. The actual role is less critical because it's really your second or third role that's going to be really critical as far as defining your career path. But know that you're getting into a company or an industry that is going to be value add, that's going to give you multiple experiences. And then it's that multiple experiences that's going to get you on your path to where you want to be.
So it's been great going back and listening to all the previous episodes and picking out highlights to share with you. Key takeaway for me is that there is a ton of valuable info, not only about data and consumer insight, but marketing in general. For example, we covered personalization, go-to-market, as well as ideas on leadership and industry expertise. And speaking of industry expertise, I was able to talk to Ethan Jones, the SVP of insurance at Castera, about what he thinks the biggest theme of 2024 will be. What do you keep in your eye on? I'm sure it's some type of AI and the market, but what are some, and maybe connect that to some marketing functions or data-driven functions? Like what are you thinking about for 2024?
I think as a whole, we're very optimistic. The big theme is around data utilization. So, we've both worked, with a lot of data at different companies, Tim. And I think there's a lot of different iterations of, if you recall back to the 2000s, big data was the big theme of things. And then, it kind of went into how we evolve the big data and implement the big data, whether it be through telematics, modeling, things like that. And now we're kind of evolving into the, new buzzword of artificial intelligence or AI and how that can be, implemented within the data structure. But I think the big theme of 2024 is there's going to be a lot more utilization of data, and there's going to be a lot more organizational data that needs to come together to kind of rebuild, how marketers look at consumers, how carriers as a whole figure out where the new normal is in terms of customers in the market. And there's been a lot of, increase in rating across the whole country where the consumers are continuing to shop. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of good news out there the past 12 to 18 months because the rate base has gone up significantly. So I think data utilization with all of those micro and macro moving factors are just going to be very key to understand if I'm growing, is it a good thing, first of all? And if I'm growing at an acceptable rate, can I continue to grow at that acceptable rate across the industry? Because the last few years have really challenged the normal of big data in terms of historically insurance companies as a whole have more data than almost any industry and know more about their consumers than most industries out there, just because they get to know their consumer, they're mindful of the consumer. But a lot of that data, Tim, in some instances has not necessarily been thrown out the window, but had to be rebuilt to say, is this who my goods customers are? Is this who my consumers I'm concerned about are? And how do I harness more of the good consumers? Because it's been very disruptive across the entire industry for all of the factors we just talked about. So I think utilization and mindfulness of how you use data will be key. Now, where AI as the buzzword of 2023 into 2024 is, I think there are a lot of good use cases for AI. I think a lot of them are still scary. Some of them are exciting, but as a whole, we look at it as artificial intelligence shouldn't be the final decision maker. It should help the people like you and me and the marketers and the companies out there mine data faster, find insights, and help make recommendations. But ultimately, we feel strongly that the humans should make the final decisions. They'll just have, it should be an additional tool to help us move faster.
Well, we've got some great insights from those guests. And I think some themes that I've sort of picked up is it's always about working smarter and moving the business forward. Because we all want to do more and drive success at every stage of the business. And we know that data can be a driver and a barrier depending on the quality of data and how the business is equipped and educated to use, manage, and maintain it. So hopefully with some of these clips from some of these great guests, we've helped you along your journey. So let's talk about what's next. We have a lot of incredible guests lined up for this season already, including Shiv Gupta, founder of View of Digital, Joan Woodward, EVP of Policy at Travelers, Christine Froelich, Head of Data Governance. And we're going to tackle themes like identity, data, personalization. And we're going to ask our guests to talk about as many aspects of data usage, marketing, product development, and how they all converge and rely on each other to deliver predictable and profitable growth for their business.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Marketing Report. This show is brought to you by Verisk Marketing Solutions, an organization created to help CMOs and their partners improve the reach, timing, relevance, and compliance of every consumer engagement. If you enjoyed this episode, Make sure you subscribe to the Marketing Report wherever you get your podcasts, and check out the show notes for more information.